Your top story at the half-hour: suicide bombers struck 3 cities across Saudi Arabia yesterday. The coordinated attacks took place as Saudis prepared to break their fast on the penultimate day of the holy month of Ramadan. The suicide bomber detonated a bomb near the security headquarters of the Prophet's Mosque in Medina, the second holiest site in Islam. Reports suggest that at least 2 people have been killed in the suicide attack. Pictures on social media show dark smoke billowing from flames near the mosque, where Prophet Muhammad is said to be buried. The blast reportedly occurred at sunset when people were beginning to break their Ramadan fast. The mosque was originally built in the 7th century. Earlier on Monday, a suicide bomber carried out an attack near a U.S. diplomatic site in the western Saudi city of Jeddah. The attacker detonated his suicide vest when security guards approached him near the parking lot of a hospital. The attacker died and 2 security men received minor injuries. Now, joining us on the phone line to discuss this further is Naeem Jenna from Afro Middle East Center. Good morning to you, and thank you so much for joining us here on VUCA Africa this morning. First and foremost, we have not heard of a suicide bomb attack on Saudi Arabia for a while now. What is the significance of this 3-pronged attack on the Saudi kingdom, would you say?
Well, there have been quite a few attacks in Saudi Arabia in the past year or so. In fact, last year, a few hundred people were killed in a few attacks, but mostly these attacks have been in the east. The fact that we now have Jeddah, Medina, I think means that that whoever is carrying out these attacks, and I say that because neither the Medina nor the Jeddah attacks have been claimed by anyone yet. That whoever is carrying out these attacks wants to take the fight, in a sense, much closer to the center. The Medina attack yesterday is, I think, particularly significant because Medina is a very symbolic place for Muslims across the world. And anyone that would carry out an attack there would definitely lose lots of Muslim sympathy. So if, for example, assuming it was a group like ISIS, even people that would have been sympathetic to the group before yesterday would lose some of that sympathy, or a lot of that sympathy, after yesterday's attack. Just by it being in Medina, but more particularly in this instance, it was outside the mosque, which is, the second holiest mosque for Muslims. So it's a very curious situation, and I think that we really should wait to see who claims responsibility for it before we can make more sense of it, I think.
Naeem, let's expand a little bit on what possibly could cause such a violent string of attacks on Saudi Arabia at this time.
Well, in general, I mean, let's exclude the problem of this not being claimed. In general, Saudi Arabia, for ISIS, for example, is a definite target. In large part because Saudi Arabia is part of the coalition that is fighting against ISIS in Syria in particular. And we see that the attacks now in Saudi Arabia, before that in Iraq, in Baghdad in particular, in Istanbul, in Turkey, these are all countries that are part of the battle against ISIS. And so, in a sense, while ISIS is becoming or is being put on the defensive in the Syria and Iraq areas that they have controlled, and is even losing territory in these areas, it is now changing its strategy somewhat to kind of take the battle to its enemies. So it's particularly looking at the Muslim countries, the frontline states, if you like, to itself, that are part of the coalition against it, rather than going further out to Europe or North America. And I think that Iraq or Baghdad, Istanbul, Jeddah are not going to be the only ones. If this is the change of strategy, we could potentially see more attacks in any of these countries, or for that matter, United Arab Emirates, for example.
Now, let's chat politics, and specifically Saudi Arabia, the reports of its own internal political conflicts. In your opinion, does this bear the hallmarks of any internal movement? Is there a possibility of such?
No, I very much doubt that. I mean, there certainly is internal dissent in Saudi Arabia, various kinds of dissent, including within the royal family itself, but also, the more marginalized population in the east, etc. But this kind of attack, setting off a bomb in Medina, as I say, is something that certainly from Muslims, and Saudi population is Muslim almost completely. Certainly for Muslims would be a huge problem. Setting it off near the Prophet's mosque is an even bigger problem. So I don't think that it would be reflective of any kind of internal dissent within Saudi Arabia.
Just lastly, Naeem, let's chat a little bit about tourism and whether tourists, specifically South Africans, should be concerned and worried when wanting to visit there in the month of Ramadan.
Well, the month of Ramadan's over, so that question's academic. I think that there's genuine concern that people should have about visiting any of the countries around where these battles are taking place. So certainly Iraq, Turkey, as I say, Saudi Arabia. These are countries of concern. The United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Abu Dhabi, etc. These are, I think, places that we should be concerned about, because if we look at these recent bomb blasts as well, there's definitely an attempt at choosing targets that would make a spectacular point. So the big airport the biggest airport in Turkey, in Istanbul, for example. Firstly, you're targeting tourists, but also it will make the headline news. So any places where there are going to be tourists in these countries or these big cities, I think that South Africans should be a bit concerned about traveling there.
Well,
and maybe we should spend our tourist money in South Africa right now.
Well, thank you very much, Naeem, for your time. Appreciate you chatting to us here on VOCA Africa. On the phone line there, Naeem Jinnah from Afro Middle East Center, chatting to us about the 3 bomb attacks that was experienced in Saudi Arabia. We got an eye on that story, and if there are any further developments there, we will keep you up to date.